Great, so this video is to give you a quick introduction to the quant section or the quant portion of the interview. So the questions we want to answer are number one, what is the quant section? Number two, why is the quant section important? And number three, how can I successfully navigate the quant portion of the interview? So for question one, what is the quant section? First off, quant is short for quantitative, right? So during the case, the interviewer is going to most likely give you some data that he wants you to work through and perform math on. In the majority of case interviews, you won't be allowed a calculator. So you're gonna have to perform this math either on paper or just in your head. So that's what the quant section is. Why is the quant section important? I remember when I first started doing case interviews, I wondered, how is this realistic and why do interviewers care if you can do mental math or not? In the real world, we're most likely always gonna have a computer or a calculator. So why is it important that we do mental math? The answer to why the quant section is important comes down to three things. Number one, the interviewer wants to size up if you have the raw kind of mental horsepower to work in consulting. So he or she kind of wants to gauge how intelligent you are and if you have the capacity to work in consulting or not. And one way that they gauge that is if you can do mental math. Number two is they want to see how you structure out problems. Throughout the entire case interview, they're going to be looking for this. How do you approach problems and do you know how to structure? And number three is they want to see how you communicate and they want to see what your composure is like during stressful situations. So definitely at some point during your interviews, you're going to run into a quant section or a math portion that's difficult for you. And the interviewers want to see what you're going to look like in a stressful or difficult situation. Do you get flustered? Do you still know how to communicate? Do you walk your interviewer through your problems? So they're looking for those types of communication skills as well. The third question, how can I successfully navigate the quant portion of the interview? And we've broken that down into 6 steps that you can do. Number one is confirm. So you want to confirm exactly what the interviewer is asking you to do. Number two is clarify. Clarify means clarify any portion of the data that you don't understand. Make sure you know what all the numbers actually mean before you start working with them. Number three is structure. So this most likely is going to be in the form of writing out a formula that you're going to follow. So you structure out how you're going to approach the problem and walk your interviewer through it. Number four is communicate. So always talk to the interviewer, tell him what math you're doing, ask him for time if you need some time to structure out or do mental math. Number five is solve, so that's actually work through the math. And number 6 is synthesize. Synthesize means take your answer once you get to the end of the quant portion and put it into context within the case. So either relate it back to your original hypothesis or the original case prompt, or even just take the number and tell the interviewer what that number means to you. Great, so we have those 6 steps here on the board, and I'm going to briefly walk you through a really simple example of how you would go through those 6 steps. So let's say that the question that the interviewer asked you is, what will be net income if costs decrease by 25%? And they give you this data right here. So they give you revenue, variable costs, fixed costs, and then what net income is. So let's walk through the 6 steps that you would go through in order to solve this problem. Number one is confirm. So in this case, confirm would look something like, you ask the interviewer, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you want me to solve for the new net income, is that right? And the interviewer would say yes. Next, you go to clarify. Clarify is taking any part of the prompt that you might not understand or any part of the data that's unclear and making sure you understand exactly what those numbers mean. So in this case, it's kind of ambiguous. They say, what will net income be if costs decrease by 25%? So you might ask, when you say costs, do you mean variable costs or fixed costs or both? And the interviewer may say, for this example, let's say the interviewer responds, we mean variable and fixed costs. So all costs decrease by 25%. You say, great. Now you move on to the structure portion. I've already written out the structure, but at this point, you're probably going to want to ask the interviewer for a little bit of time to structure out a formula or think through your response. So I'd say, is it all right if I have just a minute to think through how I'm going to approach this? The interviewer says, fine. I've already written a formula over here. So, but this is kind of what it would look like if you structured it out. I have revenue minus the new costs equals net income, right? The new costs are equal to the old costs times 1 minus 0.25. And the old costs are just equal to variable plus fixed costs, right? So that's your structure. After you write out the formula, you come back to the interviewer and you communicate your structure to the interviewer. You say, here's my formula. I've decided this is how I'm going to approach the problem. Does that sound good to you? And at that point, the interviewer has the opportunity to help you out if they think that you're on the wrong track. After you communicate, you say, great. Is it all right if I have a second to crunch through these numbers or to solve this? You come back and you go ahead and do the math. I've already done the math, and the new net income comes out to $400,000. Right? So now that you have the new net income, you solve the problem. Now it's time to synthesize, which basically means put it into context. So for synthesize, you might say something like, well, the new net income is $400,000, which means our net income doubled. It means before our profit margin was 20%, whereas now our profit margin is 40%. So this looks great. That's a really simple, fast example. In real case interviews, you can expect these numbers to be a lot more complicated, but this is just to give you a quick overview of how you would solve the quant section.